Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. And today I have the opportunity to work on an older reel. It's a Roddy 910A. I believe it was Japanese made, but I'm not certain. Let's see if I can't find the stamping on there. Usually it's on the bottom of the reel foot. But we're going to go ahead and take this reel apart. We'll show you how it's made. It seems to be doing fine. I've checked a lot of the features already. The bail is operational. The line has spooled evenly, and let's go ahead and do this. This is a reel that was sent in by Scott. Scott had purchased a group of reels from a flea market, and most of them are older reels, and he had asked me if I couldn't tune them up for him. So whenever I see a reel I haven't worked on in a while, I always try to find the schematic for that reel. I know I've mentioned in the past that some of the older reel schematics can be found on the Orca website, and you do need to be a member in order to get it, but it's well worth becoming a member of that. That's the Old Reel Collectors Association, and in this case I've pulled the schematic for the 910A, and we're going to take that apart and service it, and if I get stuck anywhere along the way, well, I'm going to refer to that schematic. So let's start by taking off the jag adjuster knob and the spool. And underneath is fairly uncomplicated. We have an axle shaft, we have a trip lever, and we have a tie down for our rotor. There's a little bit of old grease on there. We're going to be taking that rotor off anyway. We'll clean up the old grease. We'll make sure that these pieces and parts get oiled, and we'll do that in the reassembly process as well. All right, so I like to start by taking off the handle, the main gear and the like. This should reverse out. It does. This has one of those features on it with this little knob, where if you tighten to the one side, you're going to tighten up the handle so that it is firm, and if you pull it to the inside, it's going to allow the handle to collapse and tuck in for storage. So that's what that little button is about there. The actual handle itself comes off by turning it clockwise on a left-handed driven reel. We have 3 side plate screws. We're going to remove those. As I remove those, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to my channel if you like the art of reel repair, if you like it as a hobby, if you like it, maybe you're doing it as a part-time business and you just want to see different types of reels. Maybe you get one come into your shop that you haven't seen in a while. And I've been doing this a while now, quite a few years, and I've been starting to accumulate quite a library out there. So if you subscribe, you'll see the new videos that I post, and maybe they'll help you out with one of your projects. You'll notice a couple of things. I'm wearing a protective glove on my hand. That glove is there to keep the oils and greases and the like out. Off camera, I have a little parts tray. It's nothing more than a fast food container, and I try to keep most of the pieces and parts and that I'm going to be using, tools and the like, close at hand, because that's going to enable me to reach them without putting down the tools and walking away from the reel. All right, we've got a couple of interesting things going on here. We have a spiral gear. We have, I believe, what they call the helical gear, helical gear, which is driving, a secondary gear, which is what the handle is coming off of, and a oscillation gear underneath. So there's a lot of different moving parts in this one, and all of them need to be cleaned, and enabled us to put this reel back in condition. On the right hand side, you also have the anti-reverse dog. You can see it swinging out here. Notice that spring location. So that spring wraps around a stud on the spool and tucks in behind that dog to keep tension on it. And the bottom of that spring, after it wraps around, is tucked under the carrier for the pinion gear. You may just see it a little bit there. Okay, let's go about taking this stuff apart then and cleaning it up and restoring this reel the way it should be. It looks like this reel has not been serviced in a while, but you wouldn't be able to tell that from operation. The operation of it seems pretty smooth, but the gearing and the grease and the like looks like it's been there for some time. All right, I'm going to start by removing the top end of this then. That's got two screws that are holding in that oscillation gear and crosswind block. This is a good place to tell you to take pictures along the way. If you don't take the pictures, what you're going to wind up with is a bucket full of parts, and if you have a question, your question is likely to become a problem if you don't have pictures or references or the schematics that I mentioned as a place to talk to. Next up, there's two screws behind that mount. Those are holding on the oscillation block or crosswind block, and you need to remove them in order to remove your axle shaft. These reels were very well made. Roddy, at some point, Roddy was a rod manufacturer, and at some point they decided to add reels to their collection, and Roddy was the actual individual's name who created the company. It wasn't like they were trying to do a play on words with the fishing rod itself. All right, there's two little lockdown washers. Don't lose those. They belong with that crosswind block. Now we can come up top here and we can take that nut off. And this is one place where I may have to put them down because I normally just hold metric sockets. And there's a possibility that this is an American reach socket. Not sure. I'm going to try one here. We'll see what we get. Oh, it might be right on there. It is. All right. First, try to go in a counterclockwise manner to take that off. If you find that you're tight and that this is not moving, try going in a clockwise manner. It's a good place for a picture here. Notice you have you have the nut, you have this kind of rugged tie down. Then you have a clip here that's held in with a keyway that aligns your spool with your pinion gear. All of that should be able to come off. And if it falls out, sometimes these fall out, then you'll know how to put that back. This is where I'm going to spray now. I'm going to use a penetrating oil as a cleaner. And I'm just going to get enough in there to clean up that dried grease we had referenced earlier. I start with the softest thing I can. In this case, it's just a paper towel. See if we can't mop it up that way. If I need a little bit of reach, maybe there's a kind of a hard section to go to, then I'll bring in a cotton swab. And if you bring that cotton swab in, notice it does have kind of spun cotton on the end of it, and you're going to want to make sure that you don't leave any of that behind, particularly if you're using it to mop down gears and the like. I'm going to put a little bit of oil onto the mechanism. You do not need to remove this. You do need to make sure that it's working properly. So we're going to bring that in. I'm going to come underneath here where it will click to fire it, and this is doing fine. Same thing with the bail. You do not need to do anything with the bail if the bail wire is firing. A little bit of oil, work it in, and then just set it off to the side. We have 3 screws that surround a big post here. 2 of those screws look like they're holding on or trapping this little trip mechanism here. That's where the bail is going to trip. And we need to remove this assembly in order to get the bearing and the pinion gear out. So that's the next project. We're going to use a Phillips head screwdriver to do that. And as we take them out, I'm just going to put them again in a separate corner of that parts tray. Kind of keep them segregated from the others. That way I know that they don't get mixed up with the others. Okay. This is a good place to tell you if you have a question on this reel or any reel in particular, and you'd like to know some more. If you leave that in the comments section, I can generally answer them within 24 hours. Most of the time I try to answer my questions first thing in the morning, so if you've left a question 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, don't get impatient. Give me the time, because most of those questions do get addressed in, as I mentioned, kind of before I start doing my videos and working on the projects every day. Questions don't have to be on this reel. They can be on any reel in particular, and or it doesn't have to be on a reel. Maybe you're just kind of interested in the history of a reel manufacturer or something. Maybe you're cleaning out a closet and you found a reel that your dad used to own or something, and you're just curious when the reel was made or the like. Okay, we did a little bit of cleanup on that. That piece is going to go right with those screws. And now with any luck, we're going to be able to pull this bearing out. How do you like that? So right now Chris thinks I'm on a hot streak or something. Well, I'm just getting lucky. This is one big bearing. I imagine this bearing will last a lifetime, but it still requires some service, particularly as you look beneath that bearing. We just have a lot of grease that was packed in there that's just kind of hanging around the shaft now. So let's make sure we clean that up. That should come off. So should the little click ratchet. That's for your anti-reverse. And now you just want to make sure that all the pieces and parts to this reel are clean. So I'm just going to use that. I'm going to grab some penetrating oil to get the old grease off that shaft. Beautifully well-made materials in this this reel. That stuff is stuck in there, so I went from a kind of a fabric brush. We're going to go to a wire brush, one of these mini ones. You can find these in dollar stores and the like. And it looks like we're still a little bit stubborn there, so I'm going to go with a little pick that I have, and I'm just going to pull it out, and you can see that grease is really dried up in there, and that would cause a reel to skip or act a little erratic because it's just not going to come out easily. So we'll just do that. That's probably not where the main gear is connecting. The main gear is probably touching the gears below, but you just want to take the time, as long as you're doing a reel, take the time to clean everything up. That way, if you have some broken or old grease in here and it starts to break away, it doesn't jam up your reel later. All right, a little bit on there. We'll finish the cleaning of that. I'm going to put some onto that bearing and the other parts to get the old grease off there. I'm going to come back with that fabric brush now because I pretty much scraped out the bad grease. So let's go ahead and do that. And what a difference that made. Let's get rid of that paper towel. Clean it up again, and you can see that this is a much nicer, cleaner version than when we started. If you didn't notice the orientation on this, that's where a picture would have helped. I laid them out on my desk there because, well, they were going right back in and on, at least to this part. That's the collar. That goes next. Now this is grease packed, and normally I don't grease pack bearings, but normally they're not these bearings. So I'm going to just kind of do a quick little scrape with a flat-bladed screwdriver, see if I can pick up any of that old grease out of there. Not much. These things are super bearings. They're going to last a long, long time. And I think we can just pretty much go ahead and just put some new grease where that old grease came from. I think this reel was late 1970s. Now at one point I believe that Roddy was acquired by Penn, because there's a couple of reels out there I've worked on over time that says Roddy by Penn. I just don't know when that transition occurred. All right, we're repacking the bearings. I'm using Penn's Precision Wheel Grease. I'll show you the container in just a moment. But I want to get the grease back in there. And I really don't have a preference, even though Roddy may have been owned by Penn at one point. I don't have a preference for which reel greases I use, but I do have a preference that you use fishing reel grease. Don't compromise all the work you're putting in there by using something that's not designed for a fishing reel. All right, we want to clean up this case here. Same idea. I use a penetrating oil. You can find other things, I guess, to clean them with, but I generally find good success with the penetrating oils. And I want to just make sure that that inside cavity, even though this came out easy, I want to make sure that that stays that way so that we don't have issues in the future. Okay, there's a C-clip that's holding on that, I'm going to say it wrong, I'm sure of it, helical gear. There's just some words that you're just never going to get right. When I take a C-clip off, usually I can get them off with the screwdriver like I did here. And that's the one, I guess it's an E-clip, there's a third tag in there. But that's the clip we were removing to the parts tray because that'll be a hard piece to find. Now we can remove that gear. Notice the way that came out. Take a picture. There's a good reason to take a picture. There's another 2 washers on that gear. Notice the orientation of them. And this is actually a nested gear. There's a gear in a gear here. I believe that pin is what's holding those 2 together. And again, take your time, do the cleanup. So if you have a video you'd like to see, I have a lot of videos in my library, but maybe you can't find one there. Do a YouTube search and search on Second Chance Tackle. It should bring up most of the ones that I do. That's second with a 2ND. And if you are looking for one, if you're working on a reel and you're kind of stuck and said, boy, I'm a visual learner, well, that's me. I'm a visual learner. If you find a way that, or you can't find a way to solve your piece and you'd like to see it on video, if you shoot me a note, I'll try and work that into my schedule. I know there's a couple here that I've done that have involved, for example, how to set a bail on a fishing reel or something. And it's just a lot easier sometimes to show people how to do that rather than spending thousands of words trying to do it as well, right? So if you have one and you want to make a request, go ahead and do that, and I'll see if I can help you there. Well, we had the same issue with this gear here. This one's loaded down with the old grease as well, so this is kind of rinse and repeat. Go get that little scraper, pull the old grease out. So how does the old grease kind of lock up? Well, at some point in time, the reel stops going fishing. This one was found at a flea market, so kind of hard to say when the last time it actually went. Sometimes some people at the flea market, many times the people at the flea markets are just flipping the reels. They found them somewhere. Sometimes they find them at estate sales and the like. Well, those reels have been sitting for an awful long time. They accumulate. This was probably sitting this way because we have a pretty good amount of grease down here that's puddled, and you're not going to puddle if the gravity is not in that position there. So gravity is forcing it to its low point, and it sits there, and that's how it puddles. Alright, let's clean up there. A little bit more I want to take care of. There's no sense rushing anything at this point. You've invested your time and your energies in getting it. You might as well do it right. Alright, in good condition there. Again, note that spring, if you happen to have taken that spring out, sits on the back neck of the anti-reverse dog, goes around this, and there's a little tag end right here. It might be hard to see, but there's a little tag end right there resting. That's the full closure of that. Alright, this next one has to come out now, gear-wise. This should also just be sitting. There you go, that's your main drive gear. And then we have one more. We have the oscillation gear below, so we want to take that out as well. Now always use the right blade of your screwdriver when you're doing this. Make sure that you have a firm... Wow. Okay, so normally I would wrestle this and I would try to get this out, but this screw seems stuck. One of the lessons learned in these older reels is if it's working, don't force it. If you force it and break it, well, that old reel may not work again. So we're going to have to leave that one just as it is, rather than risk breaking that screw off in the case. And again, that's another issue with reels that don't see a lot of service. Do your best to clean it up. Now, if this was the main gear stuck in the case, I'd have a different worry about it. But right now, we're just going to clean that up as best we can in place. I'm going to give it an extra shot behind there of some penetrating oil just to flush out anything that may be done behind there. Spin it to make sure it's spinning freely, which it is. I see a little pocket of grease off to the side here, so we're going to work that out. But we're going to have to make a compromise here. These are one of those lessons learned. You don't fight it for the sake of doing it on an old reel, because chances are something may break, and you don't want to risk that. All right, we pretty much cleaned up the reel itself. I'm pretty much happy with the results, so it's time to reassemble. Get this one back to Scott and get it going fishing again. So there's a little bit of dried grease up top here. That's a little bit of tarnish there. And let's go ahead then and get this back together, get it going fishing, and get on to the next reel. So to start with, it's kind of the reverse process. Now, we didn't take that oscillation gear off, but we've got to get grease on it. I use a paintbrush and that pen reel grease for this. This is an artist's brush. I find that it helps me with its flexibility and the like. If you do use the brush, make sure that over time, and I do this almost every time, although you may not see it on camera, you want to wipe the brush after you use it, and you want to pull away from the handle so that if there are loose hairs, you're pulling those loose hairs out. Okay, I think we pretty much got enough grease on that one. Get a grease on the post there. We're going to just take that main gear now. We're going to wipe down the outside of it. Make sure that that's clean. Light greasing there, and grease into the gear slots that are going to interface with both the helical gear, I think I said it right that time, and the oscillation gear. This is going to drive both gears. I'm going to go ahead and put that back in. Now we're going to grab the gear that's going to drive the pinion gear. I think this might be stainless. So that schematic that I got is actually part of a bigger manufacturer's catalog for all of the Roddy reels made in that period. And some of them have a little bit more of a narrative about the reel itself. So I imagine I could go back and find out a little bit more about the materials and the like as well. All right, this goes on now. You need to make sure it seats in with the other piece. Now we have the pinion gear assembly that we want to put back in, and we're going to do the same here. So a lot of the basic maintenance of a reel, if something's not broken in it, is just about getting rid of the old grease and oils, cleaning the reel out of debris, and that happens a lot, particularly around here when folks are doing a lot of salt water fishing, and getting all cleaned up kind of restoring it and getting it re-greased, re-oiled, and fishing again. I've taken to doing this on these reels. Some of my earlier videos won't show it, but I've taken to putting some grease on the outside of the bearing. That's so that the next person who takes this assembly out quite possibly will not have to wrestle with the bearing getting stuck inside the case. Okay, we needed to make a note here when we did this as to where that trip lever was. Duly noted. We got 3 screws to go in next. And those of you that watch me in this channel know me and little screws don't necessarily play well together. And if you like, you can go get a cup of coffee. This will take me a moment or 2 or 3 to put these in. Now these screws are steel, and I have a magnetic tip on the screwdriver, so this one's not as bad as some of the other times that I get to play with the small screws. We've got a couple more screws still coming up later, but we got to get this one done first. All right, that goes on. Next up is the rotor. Remember what I said, you have a keyway here, this little keyway. It's got a slot in it. Your rotor itself has got a round hole in the center of it. The rotor, the pinion gear is oblong, so you can put this on any way you want, but eventually you're going to have to line up the stud on the rotor with the slot that matches the pinion gear. And go ahead and put that little washer on. We'll put the rotor nut on. And as you can see, the process of rebuilding the reel, once you've cleaned it all up, is essentially the reverse of the way you've taken them off. And sometimes it hurts to get ahead of yourself. Alright, I'm just going to give it a quick twirl, make sure everything's working. Boy, doesn't that look like clockwork? How many gears do you have in here? I have 4 gears in here right now, all turning the way they should. I wanted to turn them so that I got the stud low. I don't know if that's going to matter here, but I like to get the stud low when I do the crosswind block, which is up next. That happens more when you have a main gear that you can't pull out without removing the axle shaft. Alright, I have one of those washers that is in here. You want to grease up the inside slot of your crosswind block. You want to get the axle now. Make sure that that axle shaft is clean. Light greasing on the axle shaft, because if you put too much grease on the axle shaft, well, it's just going to squeeze out when it goes through the pinion gear. So you don't need much there. Line up your holes so that they're coming down straight through like this, so you can see where your holes go in terms of the alignment with the screws. In this case, I'm in pretty good condition here because I have 2 holes, so I can use a pick to hold the one. Going to grab that other little washer, put it onto the screw. See if I can't get this to hold this way. Doesn't seem like it. I'm going to use a little bit of glue, which is the grease that I use. And now we should be able to get that screw started. Alright, that's tight. And I just lost a little washer when I pulled my pick out, but it's right there. Now this is important. You need to notice the orientation of this block. This block could go high or low, and if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't have noticed that there is a a little ramp side. Okay, well my video cut out. Hopefully we have a good transition point here, but I'm just tightening up the last of the screw pieces there for the oscillation block. I'm starting to mention that we want to make sure that when you load this oscillation block that this little ramp side is over here. It's very easy to put this one upside down if you didn't take a picture. This little ramp is protecting yourself from the drive over here. So you need to make sure that as you do that, the indented side belongs on the left-hand side of this. All right, bars next. The two pieces here. Now I'm looking at my parts tray and I noticed that I didn't put this C-clip back onto that helical gear yet. No harm, no foul. Now in some cases that would be a major issue because you wouldn't have the alignment proper. Having a little problem aligning the lower one, so I figured why not start. Just move that up to the top. Grab the other one. That made it easier. Now let's go ahead. We had the red washer first. We had the metal washer, and we have that E-clip. Now sometimes you can get these in with hand strength and sometimes you can't. So always have that plan B if your hand isn't strong enough. Ready to use a pliers, and I'm sure my hand is right in the way here and I'll apologize for that. I use a pliers to just grab the back of the stud, the top of that clip, and just pull it in like that. Alright, let's put that handle on. We'll make sure everything's working the way it should. You can put a little bit of oil in there if you like. Put a little bit of oil on the threads so that they don't corrode, particularly if you're using that in a saltwater environment. You don't want to get salt into these. Tighten that all down. Okay, a quick check of the reel. Anti-reverse is working nicely. You'll see this is the clearance I was talking about earlier. If you don't have that indentation in this block, that side of the block would hit this gear, so make sure that you have all of that correct. What a gorgeous reel. Alright, we're going to close the bottom up. We'll go up top, take a quick look at the drag washers that are in there, and we'll get this one back to Scott. I'm sure he's going to enjoy fishing with it. I'm going to use a little rod and reel cleaner. It's Penn's rod and reel cleaner on the outside case. There's a little bit of dried grease and the like. This does a nice job of reconditioning the cosmetics of a reel. So if you're like Scott, if you have a reel that you'd like serviced, maybe it's a heritage reel like this, maybe it belonged in your family at one point and you just want to make it as best as it can be made at the moment and kind of put it on a shelf to display, or if you want to just take it fishing again, if you leave me a note by email on the business card that follows, I'll be happy to provide you with repair and service information. Alright, I'm going to line this up a little bit better. Don't risk cross-stripping any of the screws. Just Just take your time, get it right. Patience is kind of a key virtue when it comes to fishing reel repair and service. As I mentioned with that oscillation gear, if you're struggling with something, sometimes it's better just to acknowledge that you could do more harm than good by pulling that out. And as long as it's not broken, the risk of breaking it is probably more severe than kind of the procedure where we followed, which was just flushing out behind it, cleaning up what we could, and moving on. Last one. Then we'll go take a look at the drag system. All right. Nice crank. Smooth operating bail. Here's your drag system. Your drag system is on top of the reel. These are called top drag systems. This one looks like it's been worked already. We have a pretty... I'm going to try and get this back in. We should be able to. This is a water guard. It's almost like a pipe cleaner. One way to freshen that is to use that penetrating oil that I've been talking to you about. That'll put some oil back onto it, and it'll help it to swell and stay into those joints. Sometimes they just can't be replaced. A lot of these old ones will, over time, lose that stripe, and it's a water seal. You can certainly operate the reel without it. All right, here's our clip ring. Looks like we have some fabric washers in here. It's a pretty healthy stack of washers. All right, so we have 2 metals, 3 metals. So one round is going to go on the bottom, and the fabric washer there is going to go on the top, the red one. We're going to take some drag washer grease. We're going to put these on there so that we can keep these fresh. These are leather washers. Put the first one in, fully greased. Grab the metal washer, goes next. With the round, it's called the keyed washer. And do the same thing. I use the glove now as a tool. Put some grease on both sides of that, rub it around, insert. The middle washer is called the eared washer. It has 2 prongs on it, which go on each side of the spool shaft. The top on this washer has tarnish on it. It's not an issue. Do the same thing here, although this is a hard washer. I still had some grease left on my glove. I'll put that last washer on. I'm going to grab that clip that belongs in the groove inside the reel. Make sure that that snaps in. That's your drag service. And now we can put the whole assembly back on. Notice that there's a little bit of grease on the bottom here. Well, actually, that's the tag end from that pipe cleaner or what have you assembly. All right, make sure that you're all the way down. Time to load the adjuster button, and we'll give it the final test. All right, drag washers are holding fine, reel spinning beautifully. That's it. That's your Roddy 910A. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it. Again, please subscribe if you'd like to see more of these. To everybody in healthcare and first responders and the like helping us during the pandemic, thank you for everything that is that you do. And to all, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.